Welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things Cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka UberBear, and I'm joined by my other host.
And this is Stu. Welcome to the show.
Changes every time, the evolving Stu door.
It is. It's the evolution of the introduction. So now it's going to be, it's going to be a little bit more lighthearted.
It's going to be and at just...
And at .com.
.com Stu. Did you just purchase that .com?
I'm thinking about it. I don't know what I would put on a website, but, I'll get the domain.
So, I have a response based on that comment.
Okay.
Hadoken!
Hadoken!
That's going to be what we're going to talk about there in this particular episode. A discussion on Bolt and other burn cards in our Cube environments.
That's right.
But before we do that, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube, and we're going to enjoy our refreshment of the show.
That's right.
Stu, what are you having this evening?
Today we've got a little switch up, because usually we're like having a beer or something, but today I'm drinking a goblet. And specifically goblet.
A crunk cup.
It is a goblet, and I've posted this on Twitter, so you can go check out my Twitter, and I've got a picture of this bad boy. It's from my wedding, and inside this goblet is a glass of my wife's most amazing eggnog. It's Christmas time, and it's time for the seasonal drink, so I got a glass of eggnog.
What kind of whiskey or bourbon did she use inside of that?
She's got some ancient age in there, and this is from her grandmother's recipe. Her grandmother only ever used ancient age and just a little drop of spiced rum. And
I didn't see any little drops. I was watching...
all right, it's more than a drop.
Yeah, it was a drop in a half a bottle of a drop.
Okay, fair enough. It's a full bottle of bourbon, and then we got some spiced rum.
And some nutmeg.
And some nutmeg, and the cream, and the eggs, and all that kind of stuff, yeah. But
yeah, it's very keto. Very keto.
Yeah, it's not a healthy drink, I don't think.
No. Depends on what you call healthy. Are we talking about like 1800s healthy? Because way back then, you look pretty good if you had some meat on your bones.
I mean, it's got milk in it.
Does have milk. Does have dairy.
It's good for your bones.
I am having a...
Yeah, what you got?
I'm having a Hop Raider IPA by New Belgium. It's tasty. It's interesting. I don't know what to think about it, but here we go. Let's pop this open and get on to it. All right. Well, I'm going to ask Stu to take over here with a little bit of intro to get this warmed up.
So, as Anthony mentioned, right, so we're going to be talking a bit about Bolt and about burn in Cube. And the Hadoken comes from Street Fighter. And Street Fighter, the original Street Fighter, was like a side-scrolling kind of video game. Anyone that's familiar with one of my absolute most favorite games of all time, which was called Double Dragon.
Yeah.
Similar kind of deal. You've got two dudes, and it's kind of like... It's a quasi 3D game, right? Because it's 2D, but you kind of move up and down the street, and you've got guys up and down the road or whatever. It is. Yeah. It's like a weird axis. And then Street Fighter 2 came out, and Street Fighter 2 was a totally different. It was very much like, it was a classic fighting game, right? So it was two players, one on each side. You've got a whole roster of fighters, of players of characters that you can choose from. Two of them we're going to focus on a little bit in this episode.
Yep.
And it was very... incredibly skill intensive. And I remember a buddy of mine, he bought his little brother at the time, this is going back over 30 years, bought his little brother a Super Nintendo. And back then, the Super Nintendo came with Street Fighter 2.
Nice.
And I remember being so excited, and I was like, buddy, you got to let me come to your house and stay for the weekend and play Street Fighter. And that was like my introduction into these fighting games, right? Kind of cool that, games like that, you can kind of see how you can draw parallels between a game like Street Fighter and a game like Magic, right? You've got, first of all, your roster of fighters, which could represent your roster of decks.
Your planeswalkers, even.
Your planeswalkers, exactly. And then you've got, your pretty standard, your kicks, your punches. I love the fact that Street Fighter 2 had, your light punch, your medium punch, your hard punch, as well as your light, medium, and hard kick. And then you had all these special moves, right? So they might be your legendary creatures.
Wait a minute, there were special moves? I didn't know you could just keep kick, punch, kick,
you
punch,
could.
kick, punch.
You could. You're going to get stumped if you're just trying to punch, punch, kick. So Ken and Ryu, for example, had the Hadoken, which was a fireball, and then they had the uppercut, and then you've got E Honda with his slap, and Chun-Li with the kicks, and all that. You've got all these special things that a lot of abilities, right? And a lot of players that I would play Street Fighter with, they had their character. Right? They had their, I want to play Chun-Li, 99 games out of 100, or I only play Ken and Ryu, or I only play Guile because he's like, and you can kind of see like the parallels between, you know, just the styles that people had and that people enjoy, and, you know, similarly to how people might play Magic.
I was Blanca. Was Blanca? It looks like me, spins like me, shoots electric bolts out of his back like
playing
me.
Blanca the first time. I was like, man, this guy is tough. But
That's my favorite.
He becomes quite easy to beat because you can just fireball him to death, or just, you know, wait and Guile's like overhead kick. Man, I would just take that.
All right, so you kind of set the tone of what we're talking about. So it's definitely going to be a discussion on Bolt and Burn. Before we do that, before we dig any deeper, though, let's talk about some new cards that just came out. And I'm going to take on the first one. And these are from a recent Street Fighter Secret Lair. And I'm going to start out with Ryu, the World Warrior. And for 2 colorless and 1 plains, you get a legendary creature, Human Warrior. 2/4. Training. Whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. Or Hadoken. 4 and red, and untap it. Discard a card. Ryu, World Warrior, deals damage equal to its power to any target. If excess damage was dealt to a creature this way, draw a card. What I really like is this has the keyword text of untap.
Untap.
Because that is not something you see so often
it's
anymore.
Not.
I like that. It's so rare, right?
Yep.
Would you mind taking on this next one, please?
So the next one is Ken, Burning Brawler. So for 1 colorless and 2 red, you get a same as Ryu. You get a legendary creature, Human Warrior. Ken has prowess, so whenever you cast a non-creature spell, he gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Then you can either pay red or white to give Ken first strike until end of turn. And he has the special ability, Shoryuken!
Yep.
Which was the sound that he made on the uppercut. And whenever Ken deals combat damage, not just combat damage to a player, but combat damage, you may cast a sorcery spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to that damage without paying its mana cost. Pretty cool.
I actually think both of these are pretty cool.
They are.
If they had a place in one of my cube environments, I'd consider running. These are both interesting effects in their own way, right? I mean, that prowess and that training are both strong abilities.
Yes.
And they really carry forward what both these cards are trying to do. And I think I'm a huge fan of this untap. I'm not going to lie to you. I like that. It's the anti-vigilance, if you will. But that's pretty cool because that's a gotcha type card.
I do
and a
like
2/4 on Ryu is pretty strong.
2/4 is definitely...
To untap it and catch somebody. It's kind of neat, right?
Yeah, I do like that. And also, I will say, like, so you can see that they're mirrored, right? Ryu is a 2/4, Ken is a 4/2. That 4 power for being able to cast a sorcery spell, that's not messing around.
No, that's not. I'm impressed by both of these cards. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We do have a couple of honorable mentions that came out during that set, and we kind of alluded to them. It was Blanca and E Honda, Chun-Li, and
Dalsim. Yeah, Dalsim was like... If there was a player that hadn't played Street Fighter,
he's the one with the long arms, right?
He can do the long kicks and the long punches and all that, man. He was fun to play.
Oh, nice. So what we said we're going to kind of kick this one off of. So there was a recent discussion, and it's been kind of ongoing in our Discord regarding the power level of Lightning Bolt or Hadoken, where we've talked about whether or not it's too strong.
What I'm going to do as well, I'm going to take on a role in this episode, and a role that kind of fits my personality. Anyone that knows me when I get into discussions, as we're doing in the podcast, is I'm going to try and be a little bit of the antithesis of what Anthony's talking about.
Yeah,
so I think we're going to try and approach this from
preloaded, but not anyway. I don't think it is. You don't think it is? I think you have fair points.
I'm going to play the other side a little bit on this one.
So in a recent discussion on our Discord, we were talking about, so I am of the belief system. I'm team Lightning Bolt is a perfectly serviceable card in virtually all cube environments.
Oh, I agree with that.
Meaning it's pauper legal. I've got it in my horror cube. Yep. I've got it in my powered vintage cube. I have it in my 2-headed giant cube. I literally have it in all 6 of my cubes.
Yes.
And it has never once in any of the environments that I've come across been a detriment. But we have had some intriguing conversation about the cause and effect of having that card, and basically it being the floor and ceiling of your removal base. Right? And specifically referring to the Fey Cube, I think, is kind of where this conversation sparked from.
Yeah.
May and I were talking about this, and she has her feelings towards the power level of this card, and I can understand it after looking at the speed at which her removal works in that environment. Yep. She's looking for a lot of double spelling, a lot of even sorcery speed interaction, and it's for the tone and tempo of that cube. So I'm kind of starting to shift my attitude a little bit. I just hadn't seen a cube up until that point where this card, Lightning Bolt specific, even at the highest efficiency level that it is, has really probably challenged an environment more than it should. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I would agree. And I mean, we can start running down the points for Lightning Bolt, right? Which we've got in our list here. So first of all, and again, we're talking about, is this card a good card, right? Because I think the word right is maybe a little misleading, right? I want to say, is it a good card? Is it a balanced card? Is it an appropriate card dependent on or independent of the power level? Let's talk about the efficiency. First of all, incredibly efficient.
Extremely.
It's 1 mana, it's 3 damage, it's any target, it hits players, it hits creatures, it hits planeswalkers. It sort of tells its own story, if you will, Lightning Bolt does, right? And it's part of sort of that magical way back when one mana for 3 of something, right? So you've got 1 for 3 damage, 1 for +3/+3 for, giant growth, 1 for 3 cards from Ancestral Recall, right? So it was part of that
healing
cycle,
salve.
if you will, healing
Very
salve.
powerful.
Yes, incredible. Maybe the strongest card that's ever been
Quite
printed.
possibly, yes.
So it has an incredible efficiency rate. Any target, direct damage to literally any target, like I just mentioned, goes to creatures, goes to planeswalkers, goes to players, right? So you don't have the issue like you do. And I will say that, and I don't want to expand too much at this point, but I have played in environments where you've had those cards that have been limited either by speed or by target, and they do kind of have a little bit of a feel bad to me at times. So I think,
we experienced a little bit of that in my Munson Cube, just based on tempo, and that's something we're going to allude to here shortly.
Exactly.
But I do have a question I want to throw it to you. So we can all agree that for 1 mountain,
correct,
1 red, this is a highly efficient spell.
It is.
But then the tilting on the scale is going to be whether or not this is a fair and balanced Magic card. Yes. Correct?
Yes.
But what if this was 1 colorless? Would this be a broken card? Question.
Broken?
Yeah.
I think the word broken is one that I tend to throw around, admittedly myself, probably a lot more than I should. If it was colorless, like I had to use colorless,
1 colorless.
or if it was just literally
just colorless, 1
any
colorless.
mana, so 1 generic or 1 colorless?
Would you?
Let's be specific.
Oh, okay. 1 generic.
1 generic mana.
Yes, any color.
Would it be broken? Yes, it would.
I think so too, because now it's just opened itself up to everyone.
Yes.
So this is confined to red, giving it a profile, an expectation, right? And it kind of comes back to that color wheel conversation we had before. If someone's playing a Boros deck or a red deck, you can almost probably expect that this will be in there.
Yes.
But if a blue deck could play this, it could be problematic. So I'm playing the role of Ken in this conversation.
Okay.
And you
Hi, Ken. I'm Raya. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. When we kick, will we kick in opposite and opposing sides, or how does this work?
The characters themselves within the game are. I think they might be completely identical, actually, in Street Fighter 2.
I was curious.
Exactly the same moves.
So you can see we're just posing that question as if this was 1 generic mana that suddenly changes the spectrum on this card. I get after further debate and conversation that. In this case, and May, I'll give you a shout out on this one. I'm going to tilt with, in your particular environment, I do believe that she is right. That it may be the strongest, most pickable removal spell in that environment, and that makes a threat. One where she's running much slower, toned down paced removal spells. But as a card, Lightning Bolt / Hadoken, I just don't think it's that broken.
I don't think it is either. And I think, let's go back to your Rainbow. Right, to your if you could have a card, Lightning Bolt, that dealt 3 damage to any target, and you could cast it with any color of mana. First of all, let's even step back a little bit. If there was a creature, let's say Llanowar Elves, that was any color, but it taps for any color, or even if it just tapped for 1, let's say it tapped for the color of mana that was used to spend it. How broken would that be?
It's on the same field.
Exactly,
but it's. That's why you have the bolt versus the bird conversation, right? Because we both know on both ends of that spectrum, both those cards are deadly in their own way.
Interesting, and exactly, and that was kind of where I was leading to at that point, right? So we do bolt the bird. We went through that.
But you're getting rid of 2 really strong spells in that exchange.
You dang straight you are, right? But why? Lightning Bolt is 3 damage at any target,
right?
So, oh man, do I want to burn face? Do I want to burn a creature? Specifically, something like Bird of Paradise, I get to choose any color of mana. When I tap that, I can create any color of mana.
Yes.
Is that relevant to the discussion of whether or not I want to bolt that? Or is it just that I want to slow my opponent down?
I think you just want to slow your opponent down.
Exactly.
Because I think the focus of this episode, and you'll notice as we go through these cards, we specifically have talked about cards that go to face. we're not going to be focusing on cards like a Braid today.
No.
Right? If it hits direct to the opponent, and how over the evolution of cubes, we've started to notice that these have become less prevalent. And we've done some counts in this case. And I'll go ahead and break into those. And it'll be a good preamble anyways. In my particular powered 540 vintage environment, I run 6 instants and 4 sorceries.
10 total for direct damage.
Whereas we looked at the Moto and we counted 5 instants and 2 sorceries.
Yep.
So that's only 7 in that entire cube.
It's not a lot, is it?
And I remember when I first got introduced to Magic, the mono red burn deck was like kind of the monster underneath the bed, right? It was going to be the I gotchas, right? And that's kind of what I love so much about cards like Lightning Bolt, is that they can go to face, and that not only do you have the versatility of taking out lots of targets, so in that you have modality,
right?
Just from the idea of it, you have choices.
Yep.
Had an interesting conversation the other day with Anthony from Lucky Paper Radio. He was talking about Vindicate, how just in the text, it actually has built-in choices, whether or not it says that or not. Player agency is kind of built-in included.
Yeah. And
right?
I would say that within sort of looking at those numbers, right, first thing that stinks out to me, definitely as far as the Moto Cube, and probably I would say for your cube as well, is I look at the creatures now when I'm building. You know, if I was, let's say, for example, I'm forcing, right? You got to build mono red then.
Right.
Obviously, it doesn't just come with, you got to put instants and sorceries. There's a whole slew of wonderful mono red, like super aggressive creatures like Goblin Guide and Monastery Swift Spear and so on and so forth. Obviously, Goblin Guide less so getting, or not really getting any benefit from the instants and sorceries. It doesn't have prowess, like, for example, Monastery Swift Spear does. But I want the whole suite. Right?
Yes.
Stands to reason. But there's no guarantee that you're going to even get close to Lightning Bolt. No guarantee.
Correct.
And you know why that is? Because it's such an efficient card that I'm not going to have any problem playing that in any archetype, because it just has so much efficiency. I can go to the face, I can kill a creature, bang a planeswalker down, done deal. Kind of makes it a little bit more difficult to draft a mono red and think about this from a cube perspective. If that's something that you're trying to support, how deep down a rabbit hole are you willing to go with these kind of
because these type of direct to the face cards give versatility. They kind of give you reach.
They do.
They give you reach for any deck. If you're running a Gruul aggro, if you're running an Is It Tempo deck, Spells Matters or whatever, these give you those final points to get you across that line.
Yeah, they don't need any support either. There's no support needed.
They are desirable. Then.
They are incredibly desirable. It's not, yeah, sure. You can look at some of the, dare I say, more efficient creatures in other archetypes, right? But maybe there's a reason why you don't want to pick them up, right? Maybe it's because they're 2 colors, or maybe because they just don't fit the theme of that deck that you're trying to draft, right? But you're never going to have this problem. And this isn't only limited to Lightning Bolt. Right. This is Lightning Bolt.
Hadoken.
This is Swords to Plowshares. This is...
Question mark?
Yeah, question mark. There's a number of cards that are just, they're so efficient that they're not just going to get played within that, within the archetype that they're maybe put in there to support. And therefore, I don't know, it makes it a little bit difficult.
Do you think that the oversaturation of these two have the potential to sap the fun of the cube? Meaning, if I hypothetically drew a Bolt and Incinerate deck, etc., Fireball, and I just did that, and that's all I played against you, would you as my opponent have a good time if I just kept going to the face over and over again? So in that question of whether or not too many of these, what's that tilting of the scales where having too many of these could potentially not be considered as fun, meaning they're so interactive that maybe your opponent doesn't get a chance to play their creature strategies or play the game if you keep hitting them with multiple iterations of Lightning Bolt. I can see where that'd be once, twice, maybe fun. In addition to, I can see where if I had a deck stacked with nothing but these effects, it would become, I wouldn't enjoy it repeatedly. It's a dessert.
I don't mind playing against it, first of all. Now, that's definitely something that I think is on the curator to determine, because, and again, here on UberCube, we're not focused on a particular power level or archetype or, type of cube, right? So this could be all the way from vintage cube, at the highest power level all the way down, right? There are people that don't particularly enjoy playing against mono red burn decks, right? Because it's just throw spells to your face. Do I kill you? Yes. Okay, great. Shuffle. Play again. Lightning Bolt. Chain Lightning. in whatever the case may be. Next, is it a fun deck to play or play against? For me, I don't mind it, but I can't make that decision for another curator. I wouldn't make it for you. I wouldn't make it for the play group. And maybe that's, as with any archetype, there's a reason why people don't put Storm in vintage lists, right? This may be sort of in that same sphere that do you want to even include this kind of archetype in your cube if you don't think it's going to be fun for your player base? Now, I think this is kind of separate from the Lightning Bolt discussion, because I think this is very much about whether or not Lightning Bolt specifically is just either too powerful or too strong. Is it just too strong? Is it too efficient?
I think the tie-off on that one, on the conversation, is it has its place.
Yes, it does.
And if your environment is susceptible to that being the ceiling of your removal suite, I can see where it would be threatening. I can also see the secondary conversation of if it's such a high pick that it skews your draft choices, that it's such a powerful card, becomes recognized over time, and people start just choosing it, pack one, pick one all the time. I can see that if it becomes a problem in that nature, then I could see where maybe you should Hadoken it out of there.
So let's address that as well.
Yeah.
Right. So you said Lightning Bolt is in all of your cubes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how long do you think it would be? Let's say we decided to pick one, pack one, and you can just pick any one of your cubes right now. Right. Let's say we did it 100 times. We're going to just do 100 completely random pack one, pick ones from any one of your cubes that you choose. How many times do you think Lightning Bolt would be chosen out of 100 pack one, pick ones?
Rarely, if any.
Very rarely.
By comparison. Now that being said, it is now. I'll say it has a higher skew, say in my La Femme Fatale or in my Munson cube,
right,
where it has more lethal touch points.
Yeah,
and it's known to the players because those are creature dense, right?
Right.
So removal's at a premium, but I can see where that would skew back in my other environments, and that would be kind of the way that the Fey cube would tilt in that conversation. Is it has so many viable targets across the spectrum, and 3 damage gets so many things. It's so hyper efficient that it becomes problematic.
Yeah, and I think an interesting discussion is looking at the sphere of Magic over the last few years, right? Magic as a creature, or creatures within Magic, I should say. Magic is becoming much more creature-centric.
It is
nowadays.
It is because they do more things.
Because the creatures
are
doing
versatility,
much
that modality
more things
built inside of them.
Exactly.
Right.
And when you look at something like, and we'll stick with the mono red, right? I would love to have a Lightning Bolt in my hand if my opponent is playing, let's say he's got another red deck, he or she's got another red deck, and they play turn 1 Ragavan.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And kill that.
And I would love to play and kill off their, Birds of Paradise or Elvish Mystic or whatever the case may be. But I want to kill that Ragavan as soon as humanly possible. And I'm just using that because it's kind of been a bit of a poster child for power level over, the last few sets. But maybe that's another discussion as well. And maybe this is not totally cube. Can I use that?
Yeah,
Can I use that term? But there's so many efficient creatures out there. And this is definitely a cube construction conversation as well, right? And looking at getting that 40,000 feet view of your cube, looking at the all those creatures, look at anything with toughness 3 or less. How many of those creatures are kill on sight?
That's kind of how they do it too. They look at that power and toughness, and if you stand over and you lay your cube out on the floor and you looked at it, or that's probably not the best way to do it. Pull it up on Cube Cobra and you sorted it. And if you had a bunch of 2/3s and 1/3s, etc., and they're lethal to bolt, then that's problematic. So I could see why a curator maybe says, well, I want to inspire people to double spell. Let's go with a shock type idea. We want to hit them for 2s because I want my environment to be about double spelling opposed to super efficient, get them dead threats. But if your curve starts going up and you start going past that lightning bolt test and they start getting 4 toughness and greater, then that takes down the strength of the efficiency of lightning bolt. So now you're double spelling at that level. You can see where I'm going with that. That's kind of where my Munson cube design is going towards, is I'm going over the lightning bolt test, if you will, but I'm still like, okay, now you must shock and lightning bolt to get the threat.
And also when you're thinking about the archetypes that you have in your cube as well, right? And this, it would be interesting to see how this looks, for example, on the Munson cube or the Femme Fatale cube or any of the others, because again, like you said, you run this in all of your cubes. But how many of the creatures that lightning bolt can take out, just lightning bolt by itself, no double spell or anything, how many of them are huge, important enabler pieces for some of the archetypes that you've got within that cube, right? Because
less in that format, less in those formats.
So I would say in those format,
environments, yeah.
That surely does sort of reduce the power level of a card like Lightning Bolt.
It does.
Right? Because it can't... the last thing I want is to be like, man, I've got this great deck that I've drafted and I've got, maybe a couple of enablers, but they're 3 toughness, and you've just got this one spell that's going to take away my archetype, And now it's like, well, darn it, now I've got to maybe draw one of my other enablers.
Yeah, so you don't have any archetype type linchpins. You do in Pauper, but they're less prevalent, as in it's very creature dense.
Exactly.
But you're not looking for this one creature to carry you across the finish line in a Pauper environment, for example. So they're just kind of generically, I'm going to hit something for 3 because it's going to hit me back for 3 or 4. Yep. And that's about the exchange rate. Granted, they do have abilities, and that we can take that into context, and you will choose your targets based on that threat assessment. But at the end of the day, in a Pauper environment, Lightning Bolt's more fair, more flat, because there's no pillar pieces, no benchmarks. Whereas in the Fey Cube, using that as an example, she has a lot of synergies that are looking for these key components to linchpin these ideas together, maybe like a changeling or something that's really carrying the weight here. Yep. But if it gets taken out by something so efficient as Lightning Bolt, it can make that synergy fall apart.
And that can be kind of agnostic to the card as well, right? Because, we're talking about Lightning Bolt specifically.
It could be disfigured or anything like that.
It might be disfigured, but it might be something that deals 2 damage directly as well.
Right.
If that 2 toughness is such a linchpin point for, the enablers in the cube, then maybe that sort of lowers down how efficient you want your removal to be.
Which kind of ties into our next part when we're talking about red spells, is the defining factor is going to be the speed. We talked about this during our modal spell conversation as well too. The big turning point here is instant versus sorcery, right? And we're just going to kind of focus on the face cards in this particular conversation, right? We're not going to go outside of that. So we're going to do a comparison here. We're going to continue to talk about Lightning Bolt, Hadoken versus Chain Lightning, and whether or not that is a better choice if you're trying to tamper it down. Because the big defining factor, aside from some other text in there, is instant versus sorcery to virtually do the same thing. And then Chain Lightning, and the word chain has it said it in there, it is for one red, you get a sorcery. Chain Lightning deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So that's to the face, and it's also any target. Then that player or that creature's controller may pay 2 mountains. If that player does, he or she may copy that spell and may choose new targets for that copy. So this can go back and forth, right? If as much mana as they have in the color red, this can bounce back and forth. But otherwise, that's the trade-off for getting something so close to the idea and efficient as Lightning Bolt, but it's at sorcery speed, so it's safer.
It is. It's much safer.
Yeah.
It's a very, very different card. In fact, I would say that the power levels are so... There's no comparison between them, right? But I would say this is almost quite archetype specific, right? Because if I'm drafting mono red, a burn deck in any cube, and I see, if I've already got Lightning Bolt, Monastery Swift Spear, and Goblin Guide, and so on and so forth, I am prioritizing a Chain Lightning very, very highly. Why?
I like this card.
Because it goes to the face. It's exactly, it goes to the face. It's efficient.
Young Peasy keeps firing off. All these things are happening.
But it has that same efficiency level, right? It's still 3 damage for 1 mana. The speed definitely is important, I think, again, from that 40,000 feet point of view. But you're never, in my opinion, you're never going to have a problem with a card like... You're never going to have this discussion about Chain Lightning, I don't think. It's sorcery speed, and that by itself just takes it completely out of the realm of something like Lightning Bolt. Yes, they've been able to copy it for 2 red is nice, but I think the pace of Lightning Bolt just puts it on another level.
Let's move over to our next subsection.
So the next one we're going to talk about is discussion about cannot be regenerated. So Incinerate. Instant, again, 3 damage. It's 1 colorless and 1 red this time. So it deals 3 damage to any target, creature or player. A creature dealt damage this way can't be regenerated this turn.
Yeah, so the regeneration has kind of went the way of the dodo. It's moving away. I mean,
are you sad about that?
A little bit. Thrun pours his heart out a little bit, but this wouldn't have killed him anyways.
It wouldn't.
That's unfortunate.
It's not.
But he couldn't be. But if you double spelled Lightning Bolt plus Incinerate, he could not be regenerated.
That's very true.
That's a lot of work to kill a Thrun. True. But he also has Shrouds. We actually made all this up.
He did have Hexproof.
And you followed me down this path.
Did have Hexproof.
I just wanted to see if he'd follow me, folks. And he went down that rabbit hole, and I got him.
Thrun has Hexproof.
Hadoken.
But Interesting discussion about regenerate. Like, I will agree that I'm also kind of sad to see the end of or see the back of regenerate, because I think it's an interesting mechanic.
I think so too.
But is it ever going to be a consideration when looking at a card like a burn spell?
No, it's just literally flavor text on this card now.
Right.
With a few rare exceptions like Lotlith Troll and things like that. That would have been a much better example, and I wouldn't have trolled you so hard if I was doing that. But Lotlith Troll would be a good.
To be honest, I thought you were just philosophical. I thought it was just a philosophical
magical Christmas land, but I guess it was. And then so we're going to compare that with a card like Lightning Strike, which is these are literally counterparts. They're one and the same. Lightning Strike for 1 colorless and 1 mountain, you get an instant. Lightning Strike does 3 damage to target creature or player. These are literally mirror images minus the word regenerate. You can see where these two cards are virtually mirrors of one another. And the only defining factor is one removes regenerate, and the other one doesn't care about the word regenerate at all. I run both of these in my powered vintage environments. They're part of my Dead City. I run these in a lot of cubes. I'm a huge fan of them. They are fast, and because they have a little bit more cost associated to them, I think they start moving into a safer place within cubes if you're concerned about hyper efficiency.
I agree. And at the end of the day, how concerned are you? And again, we can always sort of pivot into the mono red burn as an archetype and look at cards like this. How concerned are you about the fact that you're having to spend 1 extra mana?
I'm not. I'll get you.
I'm not as worried about it.
No, but you have no versatility. These have innate versatility, as in any target being the keyword versatility there.
100%.
But other than that, you can't spread these. You can't do anything. So it's single target oriented on all these.
But I'm still picking them up very, very. Any spell that does 3 direct damage to the face, and obviously, again, like you say, they're being able to target a player or a creature is a great utility. But it's 3 damage. It's 1 card. I'm taking them high.
And that Incinerate art is sick.
Yes,
and I have that foiled that I run in both of my, I run that in my horror cube, my power cube,
really?
with the skeletons burning in Hades or whatever. It's gorgeous. It'll be included in the show notes so you guys can look at these cards. The next one we're going to kind of talk about is now we're going to do a higher cost, but for the versatility of multi-target options. Again, with a focus on to the face. That's why these cards were chosen. But now we're going to talk about you have a little bit more meat on the bone. So in this case, I'll start out with Arc Lightning. And for 2 colorless and 1 red, you get a sorcery. Arc Lightning does 3 damage divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures and or players. So this has a lot of, you can spread it at 1v1. You can spread it across multiple targets. This is a good one if you were playing a multiplayer cube, for example, or Commander, it doesn't matter. It has the versatility of you want to spread the wealth. I do like this card. It's a little slower, but are you willing to pay that 2 generic on top of that lightning bolt cost and sorcery speed to get an effect where now you can multi-target?
Yeah, and the same for Magic Missile is the other one that we're looking at. So this is very similar. It's a 3 CMC sorcery, except it's 2 red and 1 colorless, but it also has can't be countered.
Which is powerful.
That is incredibly powerful.
Now, I have seen this in the Fake Cube. That's where I pulled this from the list. Right. I'm a fan of this card, and you can see it's very thematic and on point with that cube.
I agree, and I think it's a great card. Here's where I agree that they belong in this discussion, but where I think the danger in these cards is, right? Lightning Bolt, wonderful. 3 damage, any target. Hit face, hit a creature. If you have a cube, and it's, I don't want to say a low power, right? But if you have any cards that are able to do 3 for 1,
yeah, these are powerful. These do have
a potential 3 for 1 on both of those.
And that is a consideration if your power and toughness is extremely low. And we'll just keep you. If this is decimating, or excuse me, if this is destroying.
I like decimating.
Aggro decks. Well, decimating means destroy by a factor of 10, so it doesn't really work. But
it's a nice word.
It is a beautiful word, but it doesn't actually work for what I'm trying to do here. And so
Trimate? Can we use Trimate?
English is not what we do.
Try, right?
Yeah, so Arc Lightning, the problem with that is if you are, like you said, 2 for 1 in a player, you can see where that has the potential to lead to feel bads. As long as your creature curve, their power and toughness is increasing and it's graduated bell curve-ish, then you'll be fine. But if you're staying really low and you're doing like a 1-drop cube or something like that, that's probably not a good example, but low power, low toughness.
Low toughness, exactly.
If you're doing like a low toughness cube, and that's the central theme of this idea, a card where you could pick off 3 for 3, it could be problematic, so many board wipe.
Exactly.
So buyer beware on some of these cards when you start spreading the love too much. Which moves over to our next one. So we've moved in some that are a little bit more efficient. We have 2 favorites. I will do the next one if you don't mind, sir.
Absolutely.
And this is one I do run in my powered vintage. It's Fire Blast. And this card is straight into the face. And for 4 colorless and 2 mountains, you get it instant. But here's where it gets really fancy. You may sacrifice 2 mountains rather than pay Fire Blast's mana cost. Fire Blast does 4 damage to target creature or player.
Say that again. How much damage?
For free.
How much?
For free.
4 damage.
For free.
Damage for free. That's right.
It's so good.
It's incredible.
Yeah, this card's bonkers. But that 6 looks really bad on paper. You're like, I'm not paying 6 to do 4. No, you're not. You're right.
You're paying nothing to do 4. All right, so the next one is Char. 2 colorless, 1 red, instant. 4 damage to any target, and 2 damage to you. So not quite as efficient as Fire Blast.
So you don't blow up your mountains, but you get to take some damage.
But it's still, it's 2 damage. I'm more than happy to take 2 damage to deal 4 damage, and again, it's to any target.
So I have this in my binder. This goes in and out of my power cube. It's actually going to go into my Munson cube because this art is sick and it's metal.
I think it's power cube level.
It is, but it comes in and out just because that 3 mana value slot, even in the burn spells, is pretty strong. Like it's choice.
What's taking those slots?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I rotate in and out.
So, and I'd be interested, and maybe we'll do a little Twitter conversation about this, right? In that space, right? Because obviously Anthony has a vintage cube. What is taking the place of a card like for me, like cards like Char and Fire Blast? They're staple cards. As much as, yes, it's 3 mana compared to just 1 mana for Lightning Bolt, and you're only getting 1 extra damage, but it's another card that supports that mono red, that burn suite. I don't know if I would want to play this outside of a mono red burn deck, ? I don't know, maybe. It's, again, super efficient. 4 damage for 1 card is very, very strong. But what are we now using these, what are we replacing these cards
It's just
with?
for testing and other cards. You have to keep your cubes popping fresh.
Sure.
I mean,
absolutely.
if Char is an amazing card, but if I stopped when Chard came out and Fire Blast came out, then the cube would be locked in time vaulted, and you guys
would also have a significantly higher bank balance.
I would, in fact, yes, I would. And Christmas wouldn't be. All right, let's move over to our next section.
All right, so the next section, we're talking about the variants of, sort of these direct burn spells, right?
But before we do that, Hadoken!
And this is going to be a section where, as we discussed earlier, you may be able to sort of look at the lower damage burn spells. So I'll start off with the classic Shock. Again, 1 red, again an instant, but it's 2 damage to any target.
Right. It does a lot of times. It depends on like we talked about, the toughness of your creatures and where this actually aligns with your environment. Mm-hmm. Whereas using the Fey Cube as an example, this lines up nicely.
Yes.
A lot of her targets fall well within this, but it's not so egregious that it has to be excluded. Whereas we move over to our next card, and I'm not certain if she runs this. I believe she does, and it's super powerful, is Burst Lightning. And for 1 mountain, you get an instant with Kicker 4, which you may pay as an additional cost of 4 to add this spell. Burst Lightning, for 1 mountain, you get an instant with Kicker 4. Burst Lightning deals 2 damage to target creature or player. If Burst Lightning was kicked, it deals 4 damage to that creature or player instead.
It's quite the difference.
It's very powerful. I run this in my powered vintage cube as well.
It's also really expensive.
It is.
5 mana for 4 damage.
Gives you versatility. When you want it, you want it. When you want 2, you want 2. When you want 4, you're willing to pay for it. You pay the piper.
I agree. And to me, it really shows how fine the margins are in Magic, right? And if you want to break it down, that we've talked about before in other episodes, and we will in future episodes, about Magic is a game of resources. It's a game of attrition, right? And it's a game of ultimately reducing your opponent's life total down to 0, for the most part. All right.
Unless they got a
Laboratory Maniac,
Platinum
Angel aside. But it's incredible how much of a difference that 1 extra point of damage can be, right? And yes, you're paying a lot of mana, 5 mana to be able to do 4 damage. That is a huge expense. But like you said, the incredible versatility that you get of having to, or being able to do that 2 damage for 1 mana, being able to do it at instant speed, incredibly strong. And the same with the next one. Talk about the next one.
So Tarfire is going to be a shock variant that for one mountain you get a tribal instant goblin, which will say faction or subtype goblin.
Yeah, faction goblin.
And Tarfire deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So it's a shock variant. That's just another potent choice that you can choose. And if you're running like in the Fey Cube, where you've got a huge faction of goblins running around and you're supporting it heavily, I can see where that card has a lot of spice to it.
Yeah, thematically, what a wonderful way to, keep with the theme of your goblins, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's so neat that you can find cards that do that. I wish they had more for my horror genre cube. I would be very pleased to see that.
I do too.
That's a Lorwyn type thing, isn't it?
It is, but I think it's maybe a bit of an unexplored design space, and I think, at least if it was me and I was, in some way, had any sway when it came to the design aspects of Magic, that would be something that I would be looking to dive into in some future sets, right? Yes, there's cards that exist right now where you can reduce, instants and sorceries and yada, yada, yada. But I think maybe some kind of, maybe we'll get multiple sets where those like different faction spells, the creatures can impact the instants or the sorceries and so on and so forth.
I would like to see more.
I really enjoy it.
It's a good world. It's a nice world building mechanic.
It is.
Our next one we have, and I'm a fan of this one, is Magma Jet. And for one colorless and one mountain, you get an instant. Magma Jet does 2 damage to target creature or player. Now errata to any target.
Any target.
And what I do like about this is the Scry 2. Scrying is exceptionally powerful.
Yes, it is.
Just to be able to do any kind of deck manipulation and move through it's great. I'm a huge fan of this. Even in a mono red burn deck or a mono aggro deck, you do want to get your lands out of there.
Yes.
You want to move them to the bottom so you can just keep hitting gas.
Yes, exactly.
And so this card is actually exceptionally powerful. So you're actually willing to pay 1 more, not have the efficiency and damage level of Bolt, but then you get to deck manipulate. Huge fan of this card.
Absolutely, because there's nothing better feeling when you're like digging because you're desperately trying to hit those last like 3 or 4 points of damage, and you hit that Scry 2, and oh man, I've got 2 lands on top. 2 lands on top, they're going right to the bottom, and then you flip that next one on your next draw spell, and it's a burn to finish the game.
Stu, you mind taking on this next one? I'm a huge fan of this card.
Yeah, so this one is Firebolt. So this is a 1 red for 2 damage to any target. It is sorcery speed, but this one has flashback.
And that's why I like it.
5 CMC total, 4 colorless and 1 red, and very simple, cast it from your graveyard and then exile it. Is only 2 damage.
4 damage,
but now we're
distributed
talking
over multiple turns.
We're talking it's 4 damage, and and this can sort of play into that attrition base, right? You got nothing better to do because you're completely hellbent. You got no cards in hand. Man, it's so good to be able to have cards in your graveyard that now you're getting a bit of extra value from, right? And so you've drawn some extra lands. Oh my gosh, I want some gas. I can do 5, I'm more than happy to spend 5 mana.
So here's the next card that I'm actually a fan of, and it's
card.
Brimstone Volley.
Love
and for
this
2
card.
colorless and 1 mountain, you get an instant. Brimstone Volley deals 3 damage to any target. I'm just going to shortcut here.
Right.
Morbid Brimstone Volley deals 5 damage to any target instead if a creature died this turn. That is powerful.
Yes, it is.
And this really coincides so nicely. I run this in my horror cube, or at least I believe I do.
Identity usually.
It's unusual because it's kind of going into a weird. It's got an interesting control aspect to it, where you're kind of doing an aristocrats sacrifice type idea. You're getting into maybe an Rakdos a little bit here, and that's what I dig about this card. So instead of like a bolt, you get a lightning axe, but a fast one.
I couldn't agree more.
I'm a fan.
This is 5 damage.
5's huge.
From one card.
I'm willing to sacrifice any little dork to go hit somebody with 5 to the
100%,
face.
100%.
So worth it. So we got this next group, but before we do that, we're gonna Hadoken, and it's gonna be our discussion on X spells and cubes. So I have 2 of them that I've picked out here. Now the one's gonna be not directly to face, but it's gonna be distributed to face, and the next one's gonna be directly to face, because that's the focus of this episode: is how to expedite your opponent getting knocked off that board quickly and not worrying about their little creature count. So the first one we're gonna talk about is a Rolling Earthquake. And I'm a fan of this card, and I'm also a fan that they reprinted this because it was in Portal 3 Kingdoms when it first came out, and it was so expensive, and they later reprinted it in I think it was from the Vault set. And for X and Red, or Mountain, you get a sorcery. Rolling Earthquake deals X damage to each creature without horsemanship and each player.
Horsemanship is such a forgotten aspect. We've got to get horsemanship back, big time.
If anybody has a horsemanship cube, please reach out to UberCube. It'd be interesting to see that. It'd be awesome.
Yes.
Just a whole cube with horses. Huge fan. Cowboy. That's why we need, so if we get horsemanship, we get that cowboy set that everybody's been asking for. That Wizards Coast, please make a cowboy plane so we can have horsemanship on the cowboy plane.
You know what? I've just had another idea for a cube. And
you haven't even built the first one.
I was just going to say, I know I've been building this first cube for about 8 months now, and I'm about 12 cards into it. But now I know what my second cube is going to be.
Cowboy cube.
It's going to be a cowboy cube.
Nice.
That's exactly what it is. And Sergio Leone, like Clint Eastwood.
You're going to straight up spaghetti western
spaghetti
cube?
Western, Sam Peckinpah, like the whole 9 yards. Heck yeah. All right, so, but this next one, to me, is the most iconic of these kind of spells.
Gets it done.
Yes, it does.
Take it away.
No, I want you to do this.
I'm a huge fan of this one.
This is such an Anthony. This might be, you know what? I was going to say, if I was asked what is one card that maybe defines the one card that has kicked my butt in Magic by you more times than any other, it might be this one.
It's going to be Banefire, and you get an X spell, and for one mountain you get a sorcery. Banefire deals X damage to any target. If X is 5 or more, the spell can't be countered, and the damage can't be prevented.
So good.
That is, it is the blue player's nightmare for a closing thought, right?
Yes, it is.
You come in, you get them, you hit them for 6, and like, wah.
It's just such an efficient card, right? And efficiency has kind of been, and rightly so, be the theme for a discussion where we're talking about cards like Lightning Bolt, where you're getting 3 damage for 1 mana, right? For 1 card. But Banefire is just such a wonderful finisher. You can just dump all the mana into it, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that have got EDH decks that have got Banefire in there and can go infinite, or can generate a buttload of mana. This just represents a super efficient card that you can dump a ton of mana into and do a bunch of damage, and to me, it's got such an elegant design about it.
I like it with Pyromancer's Goggles or 1,000-Year Storm.
Yeah.
But specifically the Goggles or anything like that. I run this in a Neheb EDH deck.
Yes, you do.
And I like to make 3 or 4 of these, and it's fun.
Yeah,
I guess
1,000-Year Storm
this whole conversation we've been having about this red burn, and this is kind of a tangent to the conversation, but I have a commander deck, and it is Neheb the Eternal, and it is literally burn, baby, burn. I mean, I'm doing nothing but I'm running 11 X spells. I'm hitting with lightning bolts. I'm trying to copy them. It is such a it's questionable whether or not it's a fun cube for a fun deck for everyone, but it makes me love and miss this in my cube environments.
Yeah,
because I love when I pilot that deck, and I just want to do that in cube. I want to sling multiple spells. I want to shock and bolt and Hadoken over and over.
And
again.
this goes back, I think, again to whether or not this is a fun archetype, either to play or to play against. Is that mono red burn? Now, again, you talk about that EDH deck. I like that EDH deck. I like playing against it. It's a fun deck. It's probably one of your more powerful decks.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody,
no.
but sure is fun, and it sure is satisfying when you get going with it.
So we kind of talked about when we're moving through this, aside from the conversation directly towards Bolt, right?
Correct.
There are alternatives. Mm-hmm. If your environment is dictated by the toughness of your creatures, and it is the most threatening, this would be for any card, right? I mean, there's only so many times, and it takes a lot of iterations and play time to discover this sometimes. But if you have a card that's such a power outlier that it is actually potentially caustic to the environment, then you can put restrictions on it. So I can kind of agree, slightly disagree, that Lightning Bolt or Hadoken doesn't necessarily have a space everywhere, right? Even though Pauper, and I think there's reasons for that, as we talked about. Whereas a Pauper environment, as they are the highest tier of Pauper, especially like using sandwiches, it's powerful, right?
Yeah.
But it's flatter that Lightning Bolt kind of just goes amiss. It's not necessarily noticed. It's powerful, it'll get it done, but there's such a huge quantity of creatures in that it just becomes an ocean of removal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think maybe
it's not damaging.
No, and to me, again, going back to the attrition and resources and all that kind of stuff, yes, it's incredibly efficient. Yes, it's only 1 mana, but it's 3 damage for 1 card, and that's it. And if I've taken out my opponent's creature, it's still 1 for 1, right? Yes, it feels bad sometimes if you've got, you've dumped a bunch of mana into a creature that maybe is an engine piece for whatever archetype you've drafted. And it always sucks to lose a creature like that. It always sucks to lose an important piece of a deck that you've built, but it's still only a 1 for 1. And I don't know if necessarily that to me is enough of a downfall, or is enough of an argument against the card like Lightning Bolt for me to argue against its, inclusion in a lot of cubes. At least not the ones that I've played. I've never played one of yours. And again, You've got it in all of yours. I've never been in a situation where I've been like, man, that Lightning Bolt was such nonsense. I can't believe that you've got this card in your cube, like it's too efficient, or it's just represented a power level that I don't think is appropriate. I've never felt like
Specifically, it was asked to be added to my Munson cube because I had slowed down to the shock, not even the shocks. I was doing the chain lightning type barrels. So I was sorcery speed, so the interaction was always post combat on the other person's turn, and the damage should already be done, right? And you guys were asking for more on the cuff. You wanted more sped up interaction, so I did add it in there.
It's incredible when you go through, like, I'm so used to playing red burn spells as, you know, and yes, we've talked about some of the sorcery speed ones, right? But I'm so used to having that flexibility of having the instant speed burn spells. And that Munson Cube, like you're talking about, the majority of those spells seem to be sorcery speed. And it wasn't just, and we could expand this out beyond just these direct damage spells.
It was Incendiary Flow I was running in that place instead of like Lightning Strike.
Yeah.
And it's night and day between those two. But one exiled, I believe, versus the other one just killed it. Yep. So I was trying to encourage double spelling by getting, I wanted you to do, as we talked about before, and it does happen in the Fey Cube where you want to play a shock on top of a bolt variant to get rid of that larger creature.
Yep.
And I do like that line of play. I enjoy trying to solve a mystery, but it does use up a lot of resources.
I better be taking out some major threat if I'm dumping 2 or heaven forbid 3 cards, certainly of direct burn or anything else for that matter, to take out one creature, right? Or one target, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I agree. And I felt like when I just felt stuck with a lot of those sorcery speed spells so many of the times. And not that there isn't a place for them, but I just have had so many feel bads with those sorcery speed spells that I just feel, to me, they just feel like
you'd already been run over by the tank.
They should be proactive.
And now you're trying to shoot the tank after it's ran you over. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
What I do like about this red, and we're going to kind of come to a closing here, is the red burn, the direct to the face, is just a wonderful finisher. It's a gotcha, right? You've got them down with the aggro deck, and you can't quite get that reach. You'd be surprised that bolt will just get that last 3 you need.
Sure does.
And that's really the purpose it serves. Keep that constant pressure on them. Keep them on their heels. You know, it's a 0-1 game, right? But at the end of the day, keep them on their heels, and that's what red burn does.
Yeah.
Other than that, we're going to say Hadoken one more time. Now we're going to move over to our socials.
Yes. Thank you to everyone who has downloaded and listened to all of our previous episodes as well as this one. It's been fantastic on this journey, and we would say this: we would always appreciate a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us out and get some exposure, get us out to new listeners. If you want to support the show, we actually have a new affiliate for UberCube. It's Inked Gaming. Please go check them out. You can get all kinds of cool custom art and stuff on playmats and dice bags, mouse pads. There's got tons and tons of like real cool custom like art and just a huge volume of products with all these cool art and cool customizable things on them.
And we will have there's a link for our Inked Gaming affiliate. So if you can support the show that way, if you use that link, it will help keep the lights on here at UberCube while getting the favorite products that you want. That is actually the site where I had our UberCube playmats made from.
That's
and
right.
They came out beautiful. They were fast. The customer service is amazing. That's why I chose to reach out to them.
Yep.
I'm impressed by this company. So we're going to keep working with them, and we're very pleased that they've accepted us into their affiliate program.
Yep. Doesn't cost you anything, but again, just click on the link if you want to buy something.
And if you're doing that Christmas shopping and you want to get for that Magic the Gathering player, I'm saying the time is nigh.
You know what? A really sweet UberCube playmat is just the best
It's the
Christmas
perfect stocking
gift.
Stuffer.
It's the best Christmas gift.
Unfortunately, they don't have one. Reach out to me if you really want that. We can probably hook that up. Other than that, you can find us at
find us at Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod. You can reach us via email. We are UberCubeMTGPodcast at gmail.com, and you'll also find links to the socials on our Twitter as well. And as always, we really appreciate all the conversation that we have over on our Discord. We have some great conversation over there. Really appreciate if you guys want to stop by, come hang out, talk about Cube or anything else. Just come hang out and say hello.
And also check out our Patreon. We have at UberCube. You can find us for the landing site there, and we've got a number of suites and choices that'll help you through navigating the Discord. And we've got some stuff that we offer in there. So check it out. We'd like some feedback on that. It's something that I'm attempting to grow. Other than that, we're going to do the thing and say the thing that we always do here is Happy Cubing.